Jack Morrison sat in his small apartment on Luna Station, staring at the news feeds that filled his wall screen. The images were always the same these days: burning cities on distant worlds, refugee ships packed with families fleeing their homes, young soldiers in body bags being loaded onto transport vessels. He turned off the sound but kept watching. The silent pictures told the story well enough. Humanity was losing the war against the Zephyrians. Badly. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago. Jack didn't notice. His prosthetic left arm rested on the table, the metal fingers perfectly still. He had lost the real arm 5 years ago. During the Battle of Kepler 442b, the doctors said the replacement was better than the original. It was stronger, faster, and never got tired. But it couldn't feel warmth or cold. It couldn't feel anything at all. A soft knock at his door broke the silence. Jack knew who it was without looking. Pete Anderson came by every day at the same time. The old Navy captain had been his neighbor for 3 years now. Like Jack, Pete had retired after the first contact war. Unlike Jack, Pete still believed they could win. "You watching the news again?" Pete asked as he walked in without waiting for an answer. He moved to the kitchen and started making fresh coffee. "That's not good for you, Jack. All that bad news." Jack finally looked away from the screen. "How can I not watch? Those are our people dying out there. And sitting here feeling sorry for yourself is helping them. How exactly?" Pete poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from Jack. "You know what would help them? You getting back out there and showing these young officers how to fight." "I'm done fighting, Pete. I told you that before." "The hell you are." Pete's voice was sharp. "You think I don't know what you do at night? You think I don't hear you running battle simulations on your computer? You study every engagement report that comes in. You know more about Zephyrian tactics than anyone alive." Jack's prosthetic hand closed into a fist. "And what good does that do anyone? I couldn't save my own men at Kepler. What makes you think I can save anyone else?" Pete leaned forward. "Because you're the only one who's fought them up close and lived to tell about it. These kids they're sending out now, they're good kids, smart kids. But they're dying because they don't know what you know." The wall screen continued showing images of the war. A Zephyrian ship, its crystal hull gleaming like a jewel, cut through a human battle group. The alien vessels moved with impossible grace, their weapons turning human ships into expanding clouds of debris. Jack had seen it all before. The Zephyrians fought with perfect coordination, every ship moving as part of a single mind. "They're not fighting a war," Jack said quietly. "They're exterminating pests." "What?" "The Zephyrians. They don't see this as a war between equals. To them, we're just insects that got in their way." Jack stood and walked to the window. Outside, Luna City stretched across the moon's surface under its protective dome. "They're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to clear us out so they can take what they want from our worlds." Pete joined him at the window. "Then we need someone who can think like them. Someone who understands how they fight." "I understand how they fight," Jack said. "I just don't know how to beat them." The door chimed. Jack frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone else. The display showed a young woman in a military uniform. Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan. Jack recognized her from the news reports. She was one of the few human officers who had won any victories against the Zephyrians. "General Morrison," she said when he opened the door. "I'm Kate Sullivan. I need to talk to you." "I'm not a general anymore," Jack said. "Haven't been for 5 years. Sir, with respect, you're the only person who's ever fought the Zephyrians in close combat and survived. I need your help." Jack studied her face. She was young, maybe 30. Her uniform was crisp and her bearing was military perfect. But her eyes were tired. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much death. "Come in," he said. Kate entered the apartment and nodded to Pete. "Captain Anderson." "Admiral Sullivan," Pete replied. "Heard you got promoted after the Vega system." 3 weeks ago, Kate sat down at Jack's table. "General Morrison, I'll be direct. We're losing this war. In 6 months, maybe less, the Zephyrians will have pushed us back to the inner systems. In a year, they'll be at Earth." "I know," Jack said. "I watch the news. Then you know we need experienced officers." People who understand what we're fighting. Jack poured another cup of coffee and set it in front of Kate. What I understand is that the Zephyrians are better than us at everything. Their ships are faster, their weapons are more powerful, and they can coordinate their attacks in ways we can't match. Every time we think we've found a weakness, they adapt. But you held them off at Kepler, Kate said. For 6 hours you held an entire Zephyrian battle group with just 3 ships. And lost 2 of those ships and 800 good people in the process. Jack's voice was flat. If that's victory, I don't want any more of it. Kate leaned forward. Those 800 people bought time for 50,000 civilians to evacuate. Their sacrifice saved lives. Don't. Jack's prosthetic hand slammed down on the table. Don't you dare talk to me about sacrifice. I was there. I watched those ships burn. I heard those people screaming on the comm channels as they died. Kate didn't flinch. And I've been listening to people scream for the past 2 years. Every day we lose more ships. Every day more worlds fall. The current generation of officers is good, General. But they're not good enough. They don't have the experience. They don't know how to make the hard choices. And you think I do? I think you're the only one who's ever made choices that hard and lived with the consequences. Kate stood up. The President is forming a new task force. Special operations, designed to hit the Zephyrians where they don't expect it. She wants you to lead it. Jack laughed, but there was no humor in it. The President wants a has-been with a metal arm to save humanity? That's your plan? The President wants the man who taught me that sometimes winning means being willing to lose everything. Kate moved toward the door. I was a lieutenant on the destroyer Hawk during the Kepler battle. I watched you hold that line when any sane person would have run. I learned more about command in those 6 hours than I did in 4 years at the academy. She paused at the door. The Zephyrians are massing their main fleet for a final push toward Earth. We have intelligence that suggests they're bringing everything they have. If we don't stop them in the outer systems, we won't get another chance. Jack said nothing. Kate reached into her jacket and pulled out a datapad. She set it on the table. That's the complete intelligence file on the Zephyrian fleet movement. Their ship types, their tactical patterns, everything we know about their technology. She looked at Jack one more time. I need the man who held the line at Kepler. Humanity needs him. After Kate left, Jack sat alone in the dark. The datapad glowed softly on the table. Pete had gone home hours ago. The news feeds continued their silent parade of destruction. Jack picked up the datapad and began to read. The information was worse than he had thought. The Zephyrians weren't just winning. They were accelerating their advance. At their current rate of conquest, they would reach Earth in 4 months. Not 6. He read about their new ship types, their improved weapons, their evolved tactics. But as he read, he began to see patterns. The Zephyrians were making the same mistakes they had made at Kepler. They were still thinking like a collective mind, still unable to adapt to truly independent thinking. Jack set down the datapad and looked at his reflection in the dark window. The man staring back at him was older, scarred, and tired. But he was still alive. And maybe that meant something. He picked up his communicator and entered Kate's contact information. The message he sent was short. When do we start? Jack Morrison stood in the Pentagon's main war room, watching dozens of young officers work at holographic displays. The room buzzed with activity, but Jack could see the fear in their eyes. They were fighting a war they didn't understand against an enemy that seemed impossible to beat. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked up beside him. She looked older than when she had visited his apartment 3 days ago. The weight of command was already changing her. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Jack watched a tactical display showing Zephyrian ships moving through human space like a slow-moving plague. But I kept thinking about what you said. About holding the line. Kate nodded toward a conference room. The briefing starts in 10 minutes. I want you to meet the team first. They walked into a smaller room where 5 people sat around a table. Jack recognized some of them from news reports and military files. Others were completely new to him. Everyone, this is General Jack Morrison, Kate said. Jack, meet your team. A woman in Navy uniform stood up first. Commander Lisa Hayes, formerly of the USS Titan. I've been studying Zephyrian ship movements for the past year. She was maybe 40, with short brown hair and steady eyes. Jack had read her reports. She was one of the few officers who had successfully predicted Zephyrian attacks. Next was a man in Army fatigues. Colonel Mike Torres, Marine Corps. I've been training our people for boarding actions. Torres was built like a tank, with scars on his hands and face. He had the look of someone who had seen ground combat. The third person was a civilian, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes. Dr. Amy Chen, Xenobiology Division. I've been studying captured Zephyrian technology. She gestured to a datapad covered in complex diagrams. I think I know why they're so hard to fight. The fourth person was younger, maybe 25? Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker, Tactical Analysis. He stood up nervously. I've been running computer simulations of possible battle scenarios. The last person surprised Jack. It was an older man, maybe 60, with gray hair and calm eyes. Captain Bill Rogers, retired? Kate asked me to come back to help with logistics. Jack knew Rogers by reputation. He had been one of the best supply officers in the fleet. Good to meet you all, Jack said, sitting down at the table. Now tell me why we're really here. Kate activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a map of human space with red markers indicating Zephyrian positions. There were far too many red markers. The situation is worse than what we've been telling the public, Kate said. The Zephyrians aren't just conquering our worlds. They're stripping them bare. Mining operations, resource extraction, complete environmental destruction. Dr. Chun leaned forward. And they're not interested in the planets themselves? They're after specific rare minerals that don't exist in their home systems. Earth has the largest deposits of these minerals in known space. So Earth is their main target, Jack said. It wasn't a question. Everything else is just clearing obstacles, Commander Hayes added. Our outer colonies, our fleet positions, our defense stations. They're removing everything that could interfere with their strip mining operations. Jack studied the display. The Zephyrian advance was methodical, almost mechanical in its precision. They're not fighting a war, they're conducting a cleanup operation. That's what makes them so dangerous, Colonel Torres said. They don't think. Like us, they don't get angry or scared or make mistakes based on emotion. Every move they make is calculated. Lieutenant Commander Parker activated his own display. I've been analyzing their battle patterns. They never commit more forces than necessary. They never pursue defeated enemies. They just move from target to target, using exactly the resources needed to achieve their goals. Like a computer program, Jack said. Exactly like a computer program, Dr. Chun said. And that's because, in a way, they are. The Zephyrians don't think as individuals. They're all connected through quantum entanglement. Every ship, every soldier, every decision-maker is part of a single collective consciousness. Jack felt something click in his mind. That's why they're so coordinated. They're not communicating with each other. They're all part of the same mind. Right. And that's also why they're so hard to fight. Human tactics are based on the idea that your enemy might make mistakes, might panic, might do something unexpected. But the Zephyrians don't make those kinds of mistakes. Captain Rogers spoke up. They do have one weakness, though. They can't understand us. What do you mean? Jack asked. They think in terms of collective benefit. Every action they take is designed to help their entire species. They can't comprehend why a human would sacrifice themselves for others or why we would fight battles we can't win. Jack remembered Kepler. His ships had been outnumbered 3-1. Any rational calculation said they should have retreated. But they had stayed and fought, buying time for the evacuation fleet to escape. They can't predict individual sacrifice, he said slowly. Exactly, Kate said, and that's what we need to exploit. Every victory we've had against them has come from someone doing something unpredictable, something that didn't make sense from A collective perspective. Dr. Chun pulled up another display. I've been working on a way to disrupt their quantum connections. If we can cut off individual ships from their collective consciousness, they become much less effective. How much less effective? Jack asked. In laboratory tests, isolated Zephyrian technology shuts down completely. Without the collective mind. To guide them, they can't function. Jack studied the data. What do you need to make this work in combat? That's the problem. The quantum disruptors have to be deployed at very close range. We're talking about getting within a few hundred meters of their ships. And they have to be activated from inside their defensive shields. So we need boarding parties, Colonel Torres said. Marines willing to get onto their ships and activate the disruptors manually. It's a suicide mission, Lieutenant Commander, Parker said quietly. Even if the disruptors work, the Marines deploying them won't be able to get out before the alien ships lose power. The room fell silent. Jack looked around the table at these people who were willing to plan operations that would kill their own soldiers. It reminded him of the meetings before Kepler. There's something else, Tate said. Intelligence reports suggest the Zephyrians are massing their entire fleet for a final push toward Earth. Not just the ships they've been using for the conquest, everything they have. How many ships? Jack asked. Best estimate is over 3,000 vessels, including their main command ship, something we've never seen before. Jack felt his prosthetic hand tighten into a fist. 3,000 ships. The entire human fleet had maybe 500 vessels that could fight in space. We can't meet them head-on, he said. We'd be slaughtered. No, Kate agreed. But we might be able to use their collective thinking against them. If we can make them think we're more dangerous than we actually are, we might be able to force them to commit more resources than they need to. And while they're focused on the fake threat, we hit them where they're not expecting it, Colonel Torres added. Jack looked at the tactical displays again. The plan was insane. It would require perfect timing, incredible luck, and people willing to die for a plan that might not work. When do they reach Earth? He asked. Current projections say 6 weeks, Commander Hayes said. Maybe less if they accelerate their advance. 6 weeks to plan and execute the most complex military operation in human history. Jack had led desperate missions before, but nothing like this. We'll need to evacuate the outer colonies, he said. Pull back all our forces to create a concentrated fleet. The colonies won't like that, Captain Rogers said. They'll think we're abandoning them. We are abandoning them, Jack said bluntly. For now. But it's the only way to save them in the long run, Kate nodded. I'll handle the political side. You focus on the military planning. Jack stood up. I'll need complete tactical control. No interference from Earth, no second-guessing from the Joint Chiefs. Done. And I want volunteers only. No one gets assigned to this operation. Everyone who participates needs to understand what they're signing up for. You'll get them, Kate said. There are a lot of people who want to hit back at the Zephyrians. Jack looked around the room one more time. These people were putting their faith in a broken-down ex-Marine with a metal arm. He hoped their faith wasn't misplaced. Oh, right, he said. Let's figure out how to win an unwinnable war. Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the asteroid belt stretch out before him. The massive carrier had become his floating headquarters, surrounded by the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. 500 ships. Of every type, from massive battleships to small scout vessels, all preparing for a battle that would decide the fate of the human race. It had been 3 weeks since the Pentagon meeting. 3 weeks of the hardest decisions Jack had ever made. The evacuation of the outer colonies had been a nightmare of logistics and politics. Governors who refused to leave their worlds. Colonists who thought they could fight off the Zephyrians with mining equipment and hunting rifles. Military commanders who wanted to make a stand at every system. Commander Lisa Hayes approached him with a datapad. The last evacuation ships. From Tau Ceti just arrived, she said. Governor Martinez was aboard. She's asking to speak with you, Jack sighed. Helen Martinez had been one of the most stubborn colony governors. She had fought the evacuation order for 2 weeks, insisting Her people could hold out against the Zephyrians. Tell her I'll speak with her later, Jack said. Right now, I need to focus on the training exercises. Through the viewports, Jack could see human ships practicing formation flying. The maneuvers looked clumsy compared to the perfect coordination. The Zephyrians displayed, but that was the point. Human tactics had to be different. They couldn't match the aliens' precision, so they had to be unpredictable. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker joined them on the bridge. The young tactical officer had been working 80-hour days, coordinating the training schedules. General, the Marine boarding exercises are ready to begin. Colonel Torres is requesting your presence in the simulation chamber. Jack nodded. The boarding exercises were the most important part of their training. Everything depended on getting Marines onto Zephyrian ships to deploy. Dr. Chun's quantum disruptors. The simulation chamber was a massive space filled with holographic projections. It could recreate the interior of any known ship type, including the Zephyrian vessels they had captured over the years. Jack watched as 20 Marines in full combat gear prepared to enter the simulation. Colonel Torres stood beside him. This is the 15th run today. The boys are getting better, but it's still brutal. The simulation began. The Marines found themselves inside a Zephyrian ship, its crystal corridors shifting and changing as the alien vessel tried to trap them. Zephyrian soldiers phased in and out of the walls, their energy weapons cutting down Marines who moved too. Slowly, Jack watched Sergeant Danny Clark lead his squad through the maze of corridors. The young Marine had volunteered for the boarding teams after his homeworld was destroyed. He moved with the kind of angry determination that made good soldiers. "Contact left!" Clark shouted, firing his rifle at a Zephyrian that materialized from the wall. The alien's energy shield absorbed most of the damage, but Clark's squad concentrated their fire until the shield failed. "Remember," Torres called. "Out. They can't phase through solid matter while they're shooting. Use that against them." The Marines adapted quickly. They learned to use the ship's own structure as cover, forcing the Zephyrians to become solid to attack. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse through corridors that defied normal physics. Half the Marines were killed in the first 10 minutes. The survivors pushed deeper into the ship, carrying the quantum disruptors that would hopefully cut the vessel off from the collective consciousness. Sergeant Clark reached the ship's core, a massive crystal structure that pulsed with alien energy. He began setting up the disruptor while his remaining squad members held off the Zephyrian defenders. 30 seconds to activation, Clark reported. "You need to get out of there," Torres said over the comm. "The disruptor blast will kill everyone in the core chamber." "Negative, sir. If we leave now, the Zephyrians will destroy the device. Someone has to stay and make sure it works." Jack watched Clark make the same decision he had made at Kepler. Stay and die or run and let others die. It was the choice that defined human soldiers. The simulation ended with the quantum disruptor successfully activated. The Zephyrian ship lost power and began drifting. But Clark and his squad were gone, killed in the blast that saved the ship. "Run it again." Torres ordered. Jack left the simulation chamber and walked to the ship's medical bay. Dr. Amy Chun was working there with a team of technicians, making final adjustments to the quantum disruptors. The devices were about the size of a backpack covered in complex electronics and warning labels. "How many do we have?" Jack asked. 50 completed units, Dr. Chun said without looking up from her work. "We're working on 20 more, but we're running out of rare materials. Will 50 be enough?" "That depends on how many ships we can get them onto. Each disruptor can affect maybe 1 or 2 Zephyrian vessels, depending on their size." Jack did the math. 50 disruptors against 3,000 enemy ships. It wasn't nearly enough. "What about the range?" he asked. "Can we modify them to affect more ships?" Dr. Chun finally looked up. "We tried that. The quantum field becomes unstable over long distances. We get random results, sometimes affecting our own ships instead of theirs." Captain Bill Rogers appeared in the doorway. "General, we have a problem. The supply ships from Earth are 2 days behind schedule. We're running low on ammunition and reactor fuel. Jack felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. Everything was going wrong at once. Not enough weapons, not enough fuel, not enough time. What about the Zephyrian fleet? He asked. Are they still on schedule? Long-range sensors show? Them entering the outer system in 4 days, Rogers said. Maybe 3 if they accelerate. Jack walked to the medical bay's viewport. Outside, he could see the human fleet spread across the asteroid belt. Good ships, good crews, but not enough of either. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice came over the ships. Intercom, General Morrison to the bridge. Priority message from Earth. Jack made his way back to the bridge. Kate was standing at the communications station, her face grim. It's President Carter, she said. She wants to speak with you directly. The main screen flickered to life, showing the president in the White House Situation Room. Linda Carter looked like she hadn't slept in days. General Morrison, I've been reviewing your battle plans. The Joint Chiefs are concerned about the risks you're taking. With respect, Madame President, every option involves risks. The question is whether we're willing to take them. General Hayes thinks we should try to negotiate with the Zephyrians. Offer them the resources they want in exchange for leaving our populated worlds alone. Jack felt his prosthetic hand clench. They're not interested in negotiation. They've made that clear. They want our worlds empty so they can strip mine them without interference. But if we could reach some kind of agreement, There's no agreement, Jack said firmly. They see us as insects. You don't negotiate with insects. You exterminate them. The president was quiet for a moment. The casualty estimates for your plan are enormous. We could lose half our fleet in the first engagement. We could lose all of it if we don't try, Jack said. But at least this way, we have a chance. And if you're wrong, if your plan doesn't work? Jack looked around the bridge at his officers. Young faces, determined faces, scared faces. People who had volunteered to die for a plan that might not work. Then we'll have died fighting instead of running, he said. And maybe that will inspire others to keep fighting after we're gone. The president nodded slowly. You have my authorization to proceed, and General, good luck. The screen went dark. Jack stood alone on the bridge, looking out at the asteroid belt where humanity would make its last stand. Commander Hayes approached him. General, the fleet commanders are requesting a final briefing. They want to know the complete battle plan. Jack nodded. It was time to tell 500 ship captains that he was asking them to sacrifice their lives for a plan that had almost no chance of success. Assemble them in the main hangar, he said, and make sure every captain understands that this is voluntary. Anyone who wants to leave can do so now with no shame. As the officers began filing into the hangar, Jack wondered how many of them would still be alive in a week. How many would see Earth again? How many would live to tell their children about the day humanity decided to fight back? The Zephyrian fleet was 3 days away. Soon, they would find out if human courage was enough to overcome impossible odds. Jack Morrison stood in the main hangar of the USS Defiance, looking at 500 faces. Ship captains, squadron leaders, and marine commanders filled the massive space. These were the people who would lead humanity's final battle. Many of them were younger than his own children would have been. 3 hours ago, our long-range sensors detected the Zephyrian fleet entering the outer solar system, Jack said. His voice carried clearly through the hangar speakers. They have over 3,000 ships, we have 500. By any normal calculation, we should surrender now and hope they kill us quickly. Some of the officers shifted uncomfortably. Others stared straight ahead with grim determination. But we're not going to surrender, Jack continued, because we have something they don't understand. We have the ability to choose death over slavery. We have the courage to fight impossible battles because someone has to fight them. Captain Danny Walsh of the destroyer USS Ranger raised his hand. General, what are our actual chances of success? Jack appreciated the direct question. Honestly, maybe 1 in 10. But that's one chance more than we had yesterday. The hangar was silent except for the hum of the ship's life support systems. The plan is simple, Jack said. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it. while their main fleet advances toward Earth, we're going to attack their supply lines. Dr. Jones' quantum disruptors can cut their ships off from their collective consciousness. But we have to get close enough to deploy them. Colonel Mike Torres stepped forward. The Marine boarding teams are ready, General. We've trained for this. I know you have, Jack said. And I'm asking you to do something that might be impossible. But if it works, we might be able to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Commander Steve Parker activated a holographic display showing the approaching Zephyrian fleet. The alien ships moved in perfect geometric formations like a vast crystal flower blooming across space. They'll reach Neptune's orbit in 18 hours, Parker said. Our fleet will intercept them at these coordinates. Red markers appeared on the display, showing the human battle positions. Jack looked at the tactical display. The plan was insane. They were going to charge straight into the most powerful fleet ever assembled. Hoping to get close enough to board the enemy ships before being destroyed, Admiral Kate Sullivan walked to the front of the hangar. I want everyone to understand what we're asking, she said. This isn't a battle we expect to win through superior firepower. We're going to win through sacrifice and courage. Some of you won't be coming home. Captain Sarah Lee of the cruiser USS Titan spoke up. Ma'am, we understand. We've all lost people to the Zephyrians. This is our chance to hit back. Jack nodded. These officers had watched their friends die, their worlds burn, their families flee as refugees. They weren't fighting for glory or conquest. They were fighting for survival. The operation begins in 12 hours, Jack said. Use that time to prepare your crews. Make sure everyone knows what they're signing up for. And remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who comes after us. The briefing ended, and the officers began filing out. Jack watched them go, wondering how many he would see again. 6 hours later, Jack stood on the bridge of the Defiance as the human fleet moved into position. 500 ships spread across millions of kilometers of space, hidden among the asteroids and debris of the outer solar system. Long-range sensors show the Zephyrian fleet approaching Neptune, Commander Lisa Hayes reported. They're maintaining formation, speed unchanged. Jack studied the tactical display. The alien fleet was beautiful in its precision. Every ship in perfect position, every movement coordinated with mathematical exactness. They moved like a single organism, which in a way they were. Any changes in their behavior? Jack asked. None, sir. They're acting exactly as predicted. No sign they've detected our fleet. That was both good and bad. Good because it meant the ambush might work. But bad because it meant the Zephyrians were so confident they weren't even bothering to scout ahead. Signal from the USS Ranger, the communications officer reported. Captain Walsh reports his squadron is in position. One by one, the fleet commanders reported ready. Jack listened to familiar voices calling in from ships scattered across the battlefield. These people trusted him to lead them into hell and somehow find a way out. General, Dr. Amy Chen's voice came over the intercom from the laboratory. Final check on the quantum disruptors is complete. All 50 units are functional and ready for deployment. 50 chances to disrupt the enemy fleet. It still didn't seem like enough. Marine boarding teams report ready, Colonel Torres added from the launch bay. The boys are locked and loaded, Jack nodded. Everything was as ready as it would ever be. Now they just had to wait for the Zephyrians to come close enough. Enemy fleet will be in range in 30 minutes, Parker reported. They're not slowing down. The Zephyrian ships appeared on the main screen as distant points of light. But Jack knew that in minutes those points would become massive crystal. Warships capable of destroying entire cities. All ships, this is General Morrison, Jack spoke into the fleet communications channel. Remember, we don't need to destroy their entire fleet. We just need to disrupt enough ships to break their coordination. Once they lose their collective consciousness, they become vulnerable. Roger that, General, came the reply from Captain Walsh. The Ranger is ready to earn her name. Jack smiled grimly. The USS Ranger had been named after an old Earth military unit known for taking on impossible missions. Today she would live up to that legacy. Enemy fleet entering weapons range, Hayes reported. They're beginning to spread their formation. The Zephyrian ships were no longer a tight cluster. They were deploying into attack formation, their crystal hulls gleaming as they caught starlight. Jack had seen this before at Kepler. It was beautiful and terrifying. "Wait for my signal," Jack ordered. "Let them get closer." The tension on the bridge was thick enough to cut. Officers checked their stations repeatedly. The helmsman gripped his controls with white knuckles. Everyone knew that in minutes they would either be dead or fighting for their lives. "Enemy ships are targeting our outer pickets," Parker reported. "They've detected us." Bright flashes appeared on the tactical display as Zephyrian energy weapons found their targets. The destroyer USS Phoenix disappeared in a ball of fire. The cruiser USS Liberty broke apart under concentrated fire from 3 enemy ships. "Signal the fleet," Jack ordered. "Attack." The human fleet exploded into motion. Ships that had been hiding behind asteroids suddenly accelerated toward the enemy formation. Missiles and railgun rounds filled space between the two fleets, but the Zephyrians were ready. Their energy shields deflected most of the human weapons. Their return fire was devastatingly accurate. Jack watched ship after ship disappear from his tactical display. "The Mumbai is gone," Hayes reported. "The Tokyo is venting atmosphere. The Berlin is requesting permission to ram the nearest enemy ship." "Granted," Jack said. "All ships close to boarding range. Execute Operation Hammer." The human fleet abandoned all pretense of long-range combat. Ships charged straight into the Zephyrian formation, their armor absorbing terrible punishment as they closed the distance. "Ranger is making her run," Captain Walsh reported over a static-filled channel. "Taking heavy fire. Hull breaches on multiple decks." Jack watched the Ranger dive toward a massive Zephyrian battleship. The alien vessel's weapons turned the human destroyer into scrap metal, but Walsh held his course. At the last second, escape pods launched from the dying ship, carrying Marine boarding teams toward the enemy hull. "Boarding teams away," Torres reported. "Sergeant Clark's squad is aboard the enemy ship." This was the moment everything depended on. Could human Marines fight their way through a Zephyrian ship and deploy the quantum disruptors? Could they do it while the ship was trying to kill them? "Clark to base," came a crackling voice over the radio. "We're inside." Moving toward the ship's core, heavy resistance. Jack held his breath. Everything they had planned, everything they had sacrificed, came down to 20 Marines, fighting through alien corridors with 50 pounds of experimental equipment on their backs. "Multiple ships are launching boarding parties," Torres reported. "The quantum disruptors are being deployed across the enemy fleet." On the tactical display, some of the Zephyrian ships began to behave strangely. Instead of moving in perfect coordination, they started drifting. Their weapons stopped firing. Their shields flickered and failed. "It's working," Hayes said with amazement. "The disruptors are actually working." But the cost was enormous. The human fleet was being torn apart. Of the 500 ships that had started the battle, fewer than 200 were still fighting. The space around Neptune was filled with wreckage and bodies. "General," Parker said quietly, "long-range sensors are detecting another fleet approaching." "Zephyrian reinforcements." Jack looked at the display. A new wave of enemy ships was entering the solar system. Bigger ships than they had seen before, including something massive at the center of the formation. "How many?" Jack asked. "At least 1,000 ships, maybe more. And that thing in the middle is enormous. It's bigger than anything in our database." Jack realized they had only fought the advance guard. The real Zephyrian fleet was just arriving. Jack Morrison stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The massive Zephyrian flagship was 3 times larger than anything they had seen before. It looked like a floating crystal mountain, its surface covered in weapons and shield generators. Around it, 1,000 enemy ships moved in perfect formation. "General, the flagship is broadcasting some kind of signal," Commander Lisa Hayes reported. "It's reconnecting the ships we disrupted." Jack watched in horror as the Zephyrian vessels they had fought so hard to disable suddenly came back to life. Their weapons powered up, their shields reactivated, and they began moving in coordination again. "All our work for nothing, Lieutenant," Commander Steve Parker said quietly. "Not for nothing," Jack said firmly. "We proved the disruptors can work. We just need to get them closer to that flagship." Dr. Amy Shin's voice came over the intercom from her laboratory. "General, I've been analyzing the flagship's quantum field. It's incredibly powerful, but it has to be generated from a central location. If we can overload all our remaining disruptors simultaneously inside that ship, we might be able to create a cascade failure." "What would that do?" Jack asked. "It would sever the entire fleet's connection to their collective consciousness permanently. They'd become individuals instead of parts of a single mind." Jack felt a spark of hope. "How many disruptors do we have left?" 15 units that weren't deployed in the first wave. But General, getting them onto that flagship would be suicide. The ship is too well defended." Colonel Mike Torres appeared on the bridge, his combat armor scorched from the battle. "General, I volunteer to lead the assault on the flagship. My Marines can get those disruptors where they need to go." "Mike, you saw what happened to the boarding teams in the first wave. Half of them didn't make it to their targets." "The other half did," Torres said, "and they broke the enemy's coordination. If we can do the same thing to that flagship, we can win this war." Jack looked around the bridge. His officers were exhausted, wounded, and facing impossible odds. But they hadn't given up. They were still ready to fight. "How many ships do we have left?" Jack asked. 67 vessels still combat effective," Hayes reported. "Maybe half of those are in good enough shape for another assault." 67. Ships against 1,000. The odds were even worse than before. "Signal the fleet," Jack ordered. "All remaining ships, close on the flagship. Everything we have left, throw it at that monster." The USS Defiance shuddered as enemy fire struck her shields. Through the viewports, Jack could see the crystal warships converging on their position. The human fleet was surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned. "General," the communications officer called out, message from Captain Walsh on the Ranger. Jack frowned. The Ranger was destroyed in the first wave. "Sir, Captain Walsh launched in an escape pod. He's commanding a group of survivors on a damaged frigate. He says he has an idea." Jack nodded. "Put him through." Captain Danny Walsh's voice crackled over the radio. "General, I've got maybe 20 Marines and one functioning quantum disruptor. But I think I know how to get inside that flagship." "I'm listening." "The ship is so big its shields have gaps near the engine ports. If we can get a small craft through there, we might be able to reach the ship's core without fighting through the whole vessel." Jack studied the tactical display. Walsh was right. The massive flagship's shields couldn't cover every surface perfectly. There were small openings near the rear of the ship. "What kind of small craft?" Jack asked. "A fighter, maybe a shuttle. Something fast enough to slip through before they can react." Torres leaned forward. "General, let me take that mission. I can fly a shuttle, and I know how to deploy the disruptors. Mike, you're needed here to coordinate the other boarding parties." "Sir, with respect, the other boarding parties won't matter if we can't break that flagship's quantum field. This is our only chance." Jack felt the weight of command pressing down on him. He was about to send his friend on a mission they both knew was suicide. "Do it," Jack said finally. "Take the fastest shuttle we have and get those disruptors to the flagship's core." Torres nodded and headed for the hangar bay. Jack watched him go, knowing he would probably never see the Marine colonel again. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship's escorts," Jack ordered. "Clear a path for Colonel Torres." The remaining human vessels turned their weapons on the ships surrounding the massive flagship. Railgun rounds and missiles tore through space, targeting anything that might interfere with Torres's mission. The Zephyrian response was immediate and devastating. Energy beams lanced out from the enemy fleet, turning human ships into expanding clouds of debris. The cruiser USS Dallas broke apart under concentrated fire. The destroyer USS Memphis exploded when her reactor was hit. Torres is away, Hayes reported. Shuttle launch confirmed. On the main screen, Jack could see a tiny speck moving toward the enormous flagship. The shuttle looked like an insect approaching a skyscraper. Torres to fleet, came the colonel's voice over the radio. Approaching the target? Taking defensive fire? Energy bolts flashed around the small shuttle as Zephyrian point defense weapons tried to destroy it. Torres flew like a madman, dodging and weaving through the deadly light show. I'm hit, Torres reported. Port engine is gone. Switching to backup power, the shuttle disappeared behind the flagship's bulk. For long minutes, there was no communication. Jack found himself holding his breath, waiting for word from his friend. Torres to fleet, came a faint voice. I'm inside the ship, moving toward the core, heavy resistance. Jack could hear weapons fire in the background. Torres was fighting his way through the alien vessel with just a handful of Marines and experimental equipment that might not even work. Multiple contacts, Torres reported. They're trying to stop us, deploying smoke grenades. The radio went silent except for static. Jack waited, watching the tactical display as the battle raged around them. More human ships were dying every minute, but they held their positions, buying time for Torres to complete his mission. Torres to fleet, came a weak voice, reached the core. Setting up the disruptors? This place is incredible. It's like being inside a living crystal. How long do you need? Jack asked. 2 minutes to link all the devices, maybe 3. You don't have 3 minutes, Jack said, watching enemy forces converging on the shuttle's entry point. They're sending everything they have to stop you. Then I guess I better work faster. Jack turned to Hayes. Signal all remaining ships. Everything we have. Hit that flagship now. Don't let them stop Torres. The human fleet charged the massive enemy vessel in a desperate final assault. Ships already damaged beyond repair rammed into the flagship's shields. Others emptied their missile tubes in point-blank attacks that guaranteed their own destruction. Disruptors are linked, Torres reported. Beginning activation sequence. 30 seconds. Get out of there, Mike, Jack said. Negative. Someone has to stay and make sure the devices activate properly. If they're disrupted during the sequence, the whole operation fails. Jack closed his eyes. Torres was making the same choice countless human soldiers had made throughout the war. Stay and die or run and let others die. It's been an honor serving with you, General, Torres said. The honor was mine, Colonel. 15 seconds. Tell my family I love them. Jack opened his eyes and watched the tactical display. In 10 seconds, they would either win the war or lose everything. 5 seconds, Torres said, for humanity. The flagship's core exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The massive ship went dark, its weapons stopping, its shields failing. And then, like dominoes falling, every Zephyrian ship in the fleet went silent. It worked, Hayes whispered. They're all dead in space. Jack looked at the tactical display. 3,000 enemy ships drifted powerless through space. Their collective consciousness was gone, severed by Torres's sacrifice. Signal the surviving enemy vessels, Jack ordered. Offer them surrender terms? Some of the Zephyrian ships began moving again, but they moved independently now, without coordination. A few tried to fight, but most simply stopped and waited. General, Parker said, we're receiving surrender signals from over 2,000 enemy vessels. Jack nodded. The war was over. Humanity had won. But the cost had been enormous. Of the 500 ships that had started the battle, only 23 were still functional. Send a message to Earth, Jack said. Tell them the threat is ended. Tell them our people died heroes. As the USS Defiance limped toward home, Jack stood at the viewport watching the disabled Zephyrian fleet. Some of the aliens would choose to join human society, cutting themselves off from their collective consciousness to become individuals. Others would return to their homeworlds to live as they chose. The war was over, but Jack knew the real work was just beginning. Humanity would have to learn to live with former enemies who had become neighbors. They would have to rebuild the worlds that had been destroyed and remember the people who had died to save them. Jack touched his prosthetic arm, thinking about Torres and all the others who had given their lives for this victory. They had proven that individual courage could overcome any odds, that human determination could defeat any enemy. The greatest victory wasn't destroying the aliens. It was showing that free people would always fight harder than slaves, that individuals working together could accomplish more than any collective.